One of the course learning outcomes for NCR 507 is that you will be able to describe the wide variety of research methods available to the fields of negotiation, conflict resolution, and peace building. I am including this chart because it places many of the research methods discussed in this lecture in the context of qualitative and quantitative research on the x-axis and attitudinal and behavioral on the y-axis. If you think about this too much, the logic will fall apart. I just want to let you know I made the numbers up in this graph so it's not representative to scale. When I was researching the available books and materials for this course, I only found 2 books that specifically dealt with research methods in NCRP. One was Doing Research, Methods of Inquiry for Conflict Analysis by Daniel Druckmann, and the other was The Methods of Negotiation Research we use in this course, which is actually a collection of articles from the Journal of International Negotiations. Some books on mediation or negotiation have chapters on research methods. Most notable are Christopher Moore's chapter on collecting and analyzing background information in his book, The Mediation Process. The Sage Handbook of Conflict Communication has a chapter by Fink, Kai, and Wang on the qualitative methods of conflict communication research. Further, Dean Pruitt has a chapter on research frontiers in the Handbook of Conflict Resolution. The research methods of NCRP are borrowed from other fields such as psychology, sociology, communications, economics, history, anthropology, business, health, and so on. Our field has ample opportunities to develop new eclectic research methods to analyze conflict. I have made some simple categories of research methods from the books and articles of NCRP research. These categories overlap and use many mixed method approaches. The categories include document reviews, observations, dialogue, survey research, and experiments. For the purpose of this course, we will concentrate on projects dealing with the first 4: reviews, observations, dialogue and interviews, and surveys. Your assigned readings in Doing a Literature Review in Health and Social Care, How to Research, The Good Research Guide, and Introducing Qualitative Research in Psychology provide details about each of these research methods. In this course, you will need to synthesize the variety of research methods into ones you can use to analyze and resolve conflicts. The articles on ethnographic observations and quantitative coding of unobtrusive observations use methods from anthropology, psychology, and communication studies to code behaviors which occur in mediations, negotiations, and diplomacy. An example of this is when I do practicum supervision of mediators in training at my dispute resolution center. I use a observation checklist for effective mediator behaviors. The articles mostly go into research steps and strategies and coding strategies. According to Fink, Kai, and Wang in the Sage Handbook of Conflict Communication, interactional data are typically the result of systematic observation. Coders are given coding rules and then code or rate the behaviors that are observed. If the behaviors are to be counted, then the rules are needed to unitize the behaviors. Unitizing is determining where one behavior ends and another begins. Unquote. One common aspect of observations is whether multiple observers code consistently when they observe the same thing. This is referred to as inter-rater reliability. One method of research is analyzing dialogue or interviews. I have found 3 stems in this process: creating the questions to ask, asking the questions, recording the responses, and the most challenging, figuring out what to do with all the responses. Mediation methods books such as The Promise of Mediation, The Mediation Process, and Narrative Mediation list many questions to ask disputants. The real challenge is how to use the responses for developing a mutually acceptable agreement and to code for research purposes. Putnam, in Methods of Negotiation Research, and Fink, Kai, and Wang in the Sage Handbook of Conflict Communications suggest 3 methods of analyzing discourse: conversation analysis, pragmatics, and rhetorical analysis. Conversation analysis looks at paralanguage, pauses, turn-taking sequence, and the structure of talk. Pragmatics looks at how language signals action, and rhetorical analysis is the study of persuasion and symbol meaning. Surveys are the primary source of information about conflict and conflict resolution processes. Nada and Kluwer identify conflict behavior and perceptions as a main focus of the questionnaires. I would add assessment of needs and program evaluations as essential focuses of questionnaires in conflict resolution processes. Nada and Kluwer identify the important issues. I differ with their suggestion to avoid using the word conflict in the introduction of the questionnaire. I have found research participants and students are often willing to share their conflict stories. Sy provides several advantages and pitfalls of conducting internet research. Most of his suggestions would apply to all forms of social research on the internet and do not specifically apply to NCRP research. In my work as a school psychologist, I go through a clinically rigorous process to identify learning disabilities using multiple methods of information. Once a disability has been identified, I prescribe the most appropriate interventions, accommodations, and modifications to optimize the student's learning. In contrast, we haven't yet standardized or developed clinical assessments to identify conflicts using multiple sources of information. In the Dispute Resolution Center I volunteer at, we use intake forms through interviews. We listen to each side of the party during mediation, and we create settlement agreements. We conduct post-mediation effectiveness surveys. All of these things end up forming a multi-method assessment of a mediation process. One of the things that will set you apart as a graduate of NCRP is your ability to use multiple sources of information to design conflict resolution systems and evaluate conflict resolution processes. For the chart on this page, I have brainstormed the variety of research methods I use to create a parenting plan. I have mediated over 100 parenting plans during my 20 years of mediation experience. Parents often bring a variety of documents to mediations. I've had parents use the documents to calculate the percentage of time each parent has, drop-off schedules, and differences in school attendance rates. between parents. As mediators, we are constantly observing client behavior during mediation. How the clients present themselves, their vocalizations, compliance with ground rules, and cooperation during the process guide the questions I will ask as a mediator, and they may have significant impact on the outcome of the mediation. I constantly collect observational data to improve my practice as a mediator. Furthermore, as a mediation practicum coach, I observe mediators going through the certification process through systematic observations of mediator behavior during the process. I use interviews and surveys during the intake process, and I use post-mediation surveys after the process. Really, opening statements in mediation and asking questions are forms of verbal interviews. As mediators, we use reflective listening processes to summarize what clients say, and we take notes to develop further questions or draft wording for settlement agreements. My dispute resolution service also conducts conference calls to debrief mediators on tough mediations. These conference calls are focused group discussions on how to improve our practice as mediators. I haven't used any formal assessment instruments in the parenting plan process. However, we do use assessments in the mediation certification process. All mediators of parenting plans have completed post-training assessments in general mediation skills, and some have received specialized training and assessments in mediating family conflicts. As NCRP practitioners, we should use a multi-method approach which involves gathering information from several sources and reviewing the history of the conflict, interviewing the clients to see if there are underlying agendas or hidden variables, using several assessment techniques to predict if the conflict resolution process is optimal given the variables of the conflict, using observation strategies to monitor participant behavior throughout the process, and using the data to create the best possible settlement agreement. We can also use the data for process improvement. Here is a sample template you can use to plug in a variety of methods to answer your research question. In the center, you would write your research questions, and in the periphery, you should list the specific methods from the reading of the research text you could use to answer your question. When using multiple methods, when you designed your research question for this course, I provided feedback to help you develop questions you could answer using multiple methods. For this week's participation, you will describe how you can use multiple methods of research to answer your research question.